So good to be here. Hi, everybody. Good to see your faces. That's awesome. Thank you for having your videos on. And for those of you who can't have your videos on, that's okay as well. So, hey, welcome. This is cool. So my name is Haesun, for those of you who I haven't met yet, and I live in Toronto. Usually I have two dogs right beside me. Actually, one dog beside, one dog behind me, because I don't know what it is. You probably have a dog or two that acts like a cat. Some of you have a cat that acts like a dog, right? So my one dog, Toy Poodle, acts like a cat. I don't know all cats do this, but she likes to perch. So she goes on the high place and she perches like this. So usually she sits right here, but she's not here. Anyway, good to be here. Good to see all of you. I don't know if you know this, but today we're going to do this thing called coaching. Have you heard that word before? So we're going to do group coaching. And what I am experimenting with, so here's a very intentional word that I'm using, experiment. By the way, I'm just recovering from COVID and post-COVID pneumonia, so I may cough, but I mean, it's virtual, so you're all safe. So I might cough and so on, so please excuse me. So we're going to do group coaching. That means it's different from team coaching, obviously, because all of you don't work together. And group coaching in a way that you show up and you will be coached. And I was actually telling people as a joke, I mean, this is going to be okay. I mean, if like 100 people show up, we'll just do it. And we're at 95. This is awesome. So let's see what happens. So group coaching will be the first part, because I would love for you to actually experience it. And we will do a bit of conversation, meta conversation about that afterwards. So hopefully that's okay. Is that okay with you that we do that? Oh, thank you for all nodding and stuff. It just gives me so much joy to see you. So this is awesome. Hey, if you want to, let's actually do a few things here. So in the chat box, if you would like to, so Phil says, okay, free vacation, I don't know, but what you can do is if you want to actually, location is one thing, but I would love to ask you this question to begin. And this is actually our way of testing if chat box thing will work. So could you all publicly text in the chat box about what you care about in your life at the moment? This is a very small question. What do you care about in your life at the moment? That's awesome. Okay. That's amazing, eh? That's so interesting. Some of you actually mentioned gardening. So here's the thing. I was sick with COVID for 3-4 days, and then I got Paxlovid, which is treatment. So then I was better by day 8. And I thought to myself, I feel better. What can I do with my life? And I looked around in my garden, and there's a tree, small tree, that is ready to be cut down. So then I went outside, tried to cut down the tree. And then next day, I somatically experienced that cutting down a tree is incompatible with pneumonia, just in case you didn't know. So if you have pneumonia, please don't do that. And here is a second test. This one will require you to message me privately. So please use the chat box, and then you see where it's highlighted in what's this color? Blue? Is that what it is? Blue. It says everyone. So if you click and then arrow down to my name, then you can actually message me privately. So there you go. Thank you. So here's the next question. Next question is, oh, there you go. Hola. Cool. So next question to you is, suppose somehow we open your social media, whether it's Facebook, what are some other things? I don't know. I don't do social media a lot. So LinkedIn is one, but then, personal social media like Facebook or Instagram, is that what it is? And then this thing that, it drives me nuts, my nephews watch. It's like TikTok, something like that. Do you do TikTok? So whenever I say TikTok, my nephews correct me. I don't know what's there to correct, but they're like, no, it's not like two separate words. But anyway, so whatever it is, the social media that you use, let's say we open it up. What do you think are some themes that you usually post about that tell us this is what you care about? So if you actually look at my Facebook, before the session, I went to my Facebook and I looked at it. And if you, without knowing me, if you were to browse through my private Facebook, you will see my dogs. And then actually more than my nephews, you will see my dogs. And then you will also see the music is a really important part of my life, especially organ, playing the organ and so on. And then third thing that you will see, I do not have any food photos, but I do actually have photos of my family. So just by looking at your photos and things that you post and share, there you go. So for those of you, we're doing this test, please message me privately, okay? So message me privately because we're doing this. When we do group coaching, I'm going to ask you to use the private message so that when I pose a prompt, I need you to answer it and type it if you can. If you can't type, if you are not seeing it, do it in your most comfortable way so that you are maybe writing it down, recording it, you are doing something so that you're documenting it. So if you are not seeing the screen, that's okay. I'm going to actually say it for you. So you will be able to actually hear it and engage in the way that is most comfortable for you. Second one is this. Okay, so for those of you who are messaging me privately, yes, that's exactly what it is. Good. Okay. And second way that I'm going to invite you to do this is, I don't know if all of you have English as your first language or most comfortable language. So if English is not the most comfortable language, well, that's something that I am comfortable with. So I will be prompting you with English, but really feel free to answer in the language that you're most comfortable with, whether it's, I don't know, Finnish, French, Korean. Well, actually, I can read Korean, so there you go. But language that you are comfortable in responding to. So feel free to do that, because what we're going to actually talk about later on is that it's not going to be about the information what we get from the content, but it will be the context that actually matters to you. So please respond to my prompts in the language that you're most comfortable with. Okay? Yeah, you good? So, hey, there you go. Hey, so, people already are sending me stuff in really cool language. Thank you for doing that. That is so cool. Now then, we're going to get into group coaching shortly, but let me tell you, I don't call it, I'm going to ask you coaching questions. I actually mentioned I'm going to prompt you. So prompt is very different than asking questions. So I really hope that you have some topics that you would like to be, I don't know, you would like to bring to the coaching session. Do you? Many of you? Okay, I hope so. And this part will be recorded with just my face showing, so we will not see you. But what we're going to do is, there are 3 things I'm going to ask you to think about. So let me actually show you. I have 2 slides for you. Power of group coaching, and here's a second slide. It will work if, number 1, if it's a real topic. So please don't pick a topic that's not your topic. Okay, so, I had this client and they actually had this topic. Don't do that. Please bring your own topic that you actually think that you will actually bring it to your own coaching session, professional coaching session. So choose your own topic. Be a real client. That's number 2. That means when you actually participate in sessions like this, you know, when I show up, I usually have 2 hats. One is I participate, and second, I evaluate. So I participate as a client, great, but then I also have this coaching hat. I'm like, okay, let's see what they do. And then I try to like write down questions that, you know, they ask. Don't worry about it. I'll send it to you. So please participate fully as a client. Don't burden yourself having to be like multiple personality at a given time. So when we do group coaching, please engage as a real client. And then number 3 is real time. So as I mentioned, please engage in the language that's most used, like really comfortable for you. Not only, I highly recommend that you actually put it in the chat box if you are able. The reason is because after group coaching, we're going to go back to your transcript. And then what really helps is, because you are texting me privately, you will have your own record of transcript that you can look at. So you're not going to see anybody else's, but you're going to see your own. So if you want to document that way, that will be really useful. But if you prefer pen and paper or audio or any other format, that's okay as well. Okay. Do you have questions for me? What questions do you have for me? As I actually have a cough break. There you go. So this is something that I am really hoping will turn out to be useful for you. So we have over 100 people here, but group coaching is done in a group setting, but very individual. So I'm really hoping that you will engage in this experiment. And at the same time, I will do my best. And my expectation is that you will also fully engage. Okay, so ready to do this? Okay. So weird that I see your faces, you're nodding, we're responding. I've never met you. The weirdest thing. Okay, let's get started. Remember to privately message me, not publicly. Okay. So here's my first prompt. When you think about some areas of your life where you would like to see some positive differences, positive changes, maybe small positive changes, maybe relational, it could be something to do with your work. As you think about it, what is that area or 2 that comes to your mind? Feel free to put in the chat box in your language. More, maybe something different, something more, something less. What would you like to see different or better, right? Wow. I'll give about 20-second pause.
Could you repeat that question, please?
You know, Karina, if I repeat, it's going to be a completely different question. Ready? Somehow, how would you know that having this conversation actually has made a positive difference for you? After this call, as you walk around the virtual networking session, or just go back to your life afterwards, how would you know that having this conversation somehow contributed to that direction that you would like to see more of? By the way, for those of you who are trying to write down the questions, don't worry about it. This is being recorded. You'll get a copy, okay? Just engage. And as you type and think, here's my next prompt for you. Somehow, I'm really hoping that whatever you're actually putting in the chat box as you're processing this, somehow there is a really good reason for you that this particular topic is important for you at this moment in your life. So why is this topic significant at this time for you? What's the significance? Why is this so important for you? Wow. Here for your responses, especially in your own language. That's beautiful. Thank you. And for those of you who are not typing, I hope that you are really engaging in processing these prompts. Okay. And another prompt for you at this point would be this. Let me know if it's too fast. Is that okay? Okay. So somehow the topics that you're talking about here, by the way, actually I can see what you're writing, so I can tell that these are really personal, as well as quite significant for you. So thank you actually for sharing these details. Thank you so much for that. I'm actually writing what you're I'm reading what you're writing actually. And as you think about these things, and somehow, not only because we have this conversation today, but because this is something that you've been thinking about for a while. So I'm guessing that you would like to see this somehow come true. Maybe in a little bit, you want more of what you're talking about here. And somehow suppose, maybe even after this call, or maybe tomorrow, as you go about your day, somehow you notice that you are seeing some of these things are already happening. Suppose these differences that you talk about here, small differences, and some of you pretty big differences, suppose there are actually happening more than you thought, and things are moving in your preferred direction. What difference would you notice about how you go about your day? What would you be doing more? What would you be doing less? What would you be doing differently? And who would actually notice this difference about you? And somehow these differences will show up in your relationships with people, maybe even your pets. And who will notice that difference? And what do they notice? And somehow imagine yourself going through your day, seeing the people that you see, doing the things that you do, but somehow you're doing them maybe a little bit differently, in a way that you would like to do, in a way that you would prefer to see. What difference do you think that will make for your relationships around you? Maybe even relationships with yourself. Maybe how you relate to your work, how you relate to your life. What difference would you notice? Gosh, I really wish that you could see my chat box. It's just so tremendously, like it's so profound. Thank you. Wow. And now I'm going to prompt you with a little bit different direction, actually. Somehow, as you walk around that day, maybe tomorrow, someday this week, when your preferred scenarios are happening, maybe more than it has been, and you're meeting those people that you see, and they're noticing some small differences about how you engage. And you notice some things about you too, that maybe other people wouldn't notice at all, but you know that's different about you. Especially from the time that you wake up in the morning. You know something's different about you. Something's better about you. But other people may not notice that readily. Maybe it might show up later, but you will notice that. And as you go about your morning routine, or whenever you wake up, your wake up routine, and go about your day, there are some things that you might start doing differently that you always wanted to, but didn't actually get to, but now you are. What do you see yourself doing? As you look around your surroundings, what do you notice that's different that you would love to see happen? And as you stand there looking around, I'm going to actually ask you to pause and think about a recent time that you have noticed some of those things already. Some parts of that conversation, some parts of that maybe feeling, or maybe how you show up, how they show up. You have already seen some parts of that. So when was the most recent time that you saw some parts of it? That's incredible that you're, wow, okay. And I have maybe 2 or 3 more prompts for you. Next prompt is, I'm doing this meta conversation because we are doing it one way. I mean, I wouldn't tell my client, my next prompt is, but next prompt is about, some of you actually already know this. It's called scaling. Scaling question, okay? Scale of 1 to 10, let's say, or 10 to 1, however way you like it. Let's say a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is some of these things that you're actually describing earlier, and you can actually see in your chapter history or how you're documenting it right now. 10 is, they're actually happening in its own ways already in my life. 10 is like, it's not like far-fetched. It's actually still very attractive, and also it's already happening in some parts, is 10. And then 1 is like, gosh, that's like fantasy world. None of that is happening. And I don't think it will ever happen, is 1. What number would you actually give yourself? Okay. And as you are giving yourself a number, so far, I think I actually had all the numbers, actually including 0 to 10, and all the halves as well. 3-point half, thank you. So, or 2 or 4, and some of you 10. If you have 10, what are you doing? I'm kidding. Okay, you're welcome here. So for those of you who actually have a number on that scale, I'm going to actually ask you, if you feel that number is good enough, that's cool. But if you feel that that number is not good enough for you, I want you to think about this. This number that you gave yourself, is that good enough for you? If not, then that's okay. Okay. Now, whatever number that you actually said you're at, there are a couple prompts here. Number 1 is, how are you managing to be at that number, not any lower? Especially if you feel like you're pretty low on the scale that of your preference. How are you coping with all that? Some of you might feel like, I am at 0 or 1 or even 2 and so on, and it's really low for you. What really helps you cope at where you are? And some other of you who actually said some other numbers, what got you to that number? And how come you're already at that number, not lower than that? Maybe somebody, maybe something, or you did something that really got you to that number already. So please be very specific in identifying how you got up to that number already. Okay? Wow. Maybe something that you did or didn't, you were or you weren't, that really got you to this number. And somehow you're coping, although it may feel like it's pretty low, or maybe it feels like it's pretty high. How did you get there, right? And here's your second last prompt. As you're writing this amazing, this is what we call curation, by the way. It's not narration, it's curation. You're curating your story. As you do this, I am absolutely honored to witness some of your stories here that are, wow, profoundly human. Thank you. And second last prompt is this: which point on this scale will be actually good enough? Not perfect or even ideal, but good enough. Knowing your life, because you know your life best, eh? So knowing your life, what point will be a good enough point for you to be at within next maybe couple weeks, even 3-4 weeks? It's slightly different than where would you like to be versus where is a good enough point for you to be at. Okay, thank you. Okay. Wow, look at the numbers. Huh. And could you please think about at that number, what's specifically different at that number that you don't see at your current number? And if you think that where you are at right now is good enough, that's good enough. That's cool. How would you actually keep at it? How do you maintain that, right? Some of you, you're expanding scales to 12. That's awesome. Ah, wow. And as you are reflecting, I often tell my clients that how often do we actually have this time, dedicated time, that we consider your life without being interrupted. And I think huge part of what actually makes coaching work is that time that we set aside. And what often happens is that people leave that time, and right now it's accelerated time together with like 100 people in the room, but it still is useful in a way that many of you are saying these things in the chat box that I am just completely blown away by. And when we think about coaching as a process like this, and what's so interesting is we get distracted by information. And we maybe want to have more information, so we ask more questions. But then for those of you who are engaging in your own language that I don't understand, I really hope that that was useful for you, because I don't know what you talked about. So here's my last little bit for you. What was specifically useful? What insights do you have now that you actually didn't have at the beginning of this coaching conversation? What insights and ideas and pleasant surprises do you have? And feel free to actually put it in the public chat for that one. What difference did this actually make for you as you're leaving this coaching conversation? And I hope that there are some ideas that you're putting forward that emerged for you. And there are some insights that you were not clear about that are clearer now. Some of you might actually have some action items too. But something about meaning changing, insights emerging, those are the fun ones. Yeah. I don't even know how this was useful because I don't understand the language. I love it. Thank you. And here's my very last priming prompt. When clients leave my room, I usually say something like this. So because we had this conversation, very likely you're going to actually catch yourself in those situations where you notice things are actually happening in your preferred way. And when you notice them, I really hope you to just notice them and take notes so that when we come back for our follow-up, we can chat about it. So suppose we meet for our follow-up in, let's say, 3 weeks. What would you like me to ask you about or check in about? You take your time. And you can respond privately or publicly. It's up to you. If you're comfortable with public, you can do that. You're making public disclaimer. This is what I'm going to do. That's awesome. If it's private, that's great too. Oh, wow. Okay. That's neat. Check in about this. Okay. Wow. Cool. Well, congratulations, everybody. We've done the very first group coaching demo with 100 people in the room. And that actually I've done. I'm sure, you're a part of some other ones too, but hey, I wanted to just, experiment. Thank you for the clap, Clara. I saw that. Thank you. This is pretty fun, isn't it? Now, what I would love to thank you for the clap. Hey, pretty good. Yes, the hearts. Thank you. Now, we're going to do a little bit of debrief because this is really interesting to look at. Now, there are a few things in coaching that people do still. When they teach. So somehow coaching is still taught as a set of questions. So they say, here are a set of questions, memorize them. But for some of you who are familiar with acting, so any of you are in acting, been theater or acting and so on, eh? Hey, there you go. Thank you. That's neat. And when you actually see people who are acting, I always ask them, how do you memorize the entire script book? How do you do that? Because I met a lot of actors who are doing coaching videos and training videos, and they actually have to memorize it. I'm like, how do you even do this memorize? Like, how in such a short time? Every single time I ask good ones, they say, I don't memorize the lines. I memorize the intentions. And that just, wow. And it works like that for me to think about coaching. So coaching is not about questions and what questions we ask, because questions are sure it works in certain ways, but it's not about questions. Then what is it that we are actually teaching? So here's this idea of pedagogy of curiosity. So if coaches actually leave the training with a set of questions memorized, is that a good measure of success? So they know exactly 12 questions from beginning to end. They just memorize it and recite. About 10 years ago, one of my master classes, people came and they actually did coaching session demos in front of people. And that's exactly what I saw. 12 of them memorizing more or less the same questions from beginning to end. Sure, clients found it helpful. That's great. But as an educator, I was so troubled. If that was 12 questions that they had to memorize or 15 questions, then why did they have to spend like 6 months? What are we doing in class? I can just give you like a sheet of paper and say, memorize it. What is it then? What is it that we do if it's not asking questions only? So that actually has become one of my biggest frustrations in coaching education. So pedagogy of curiosity is if coaches can leave classrooms being more curious, not only being more curious, but it's a specific curiosity, it's curated curiosity, then I will take it as a huge success. Now, when we do coaching, all of you, I really hope, will sound different, but there is similar direction or orientation. So I wanted to actually show you this piece because people often ask me these days, well, do you think AI will ever, replace human coaches? I love that question because, I think people are a little scared, aren't we? Like AI running the world and we're scared? Great. And, they say, what do you think AI will, never replace that we do? How would you answer that question, actually? What do you think AI will never replace what we do? Clara, you have your hand up. Yeah, feel free to speak or feel free to type. It's up to you. Empathy and compassion, many of you say. Love.
Love.
Love, Clara.
Human connection.
All that, eh? Isn't that true? Pearl, what do you mean? You mean AI doesn't have a soul? You kidding? So when I look at it from, Hannah, you say nuance. Sometimes actually AI is getting really good at it. The nuance of communication. What we mean by that is the pauses, these things that we, what do you call it? These moments of nuance. So we're inserting, sometimes what happens is AI is way too clean. So when you listen to automated messages, too clean. No one talks like that. But imagine somebody picks up the phone, it's like, hi. AI doesn't do, hi, they do hi. So nuance, inserting those nuances will actually make AI much more like human. But then what can we offer? So many of my students ask me, because they are now fearful, am I in the right profession that will be like soon be replaced? And more I look at the tapes. What I don't find is that so far AIs are not curious. It can give you information. So if all you do in your coaching session is information seeking, AI will do a better job than you do. But then what they may not do is caring. Do you feel like ChatGPT cares about you? I mean, if you have time, please do this experiment with ChatGPT. Tell it. So for those of you who don't know what ChatGPT is, it's a monster. It's not a monster. It's a very convenient education tool so far. I don't know what's going to be in 2 years, but it's AI-driven sort of, I don't know, what do you call it? Artificial intelligence thing that is smarter than me, smarter than probably all of us. And it gives you information. Now, in coaching conversation, if clients are getting information from us, I'm not kidding, ChatGPT will be a better bet for them. But if they actually experience transformation, now that's a different story. But then for our clients to experience something like that, now what needs to change? When we say transform, form changes. What changes as they sit with us? Something needs to change. What changes and how do we contribute? So, oh, thank you, Carrie. It's a natural language processing model. Yes. So when you actually have time, please go to ChatGPT and do these prompts and say, okay, so now you are a coach. So coach me. Oh, I've done that. And you know what ChatGPT says? It will tell you, I'm a language-based model. I don't do that kind of stuff. So you have to actually sort of comfort it and say, it's okay. We're just role playing. So role play being my coach. And it will say, okay. And then it will start coaching you. So I've done that, actually saying, coach me. So you are now my coach and you will use solution focus method. You will use CBC. You will use this. So I instructed it specifically. And first 3 prompts sounded pretty legit. 4th and 5th, it's just so wrong. So then I was angry at it. So I'm like, oh, this is so wrong. And you know what ChatGPT said? Apologies. It's like, have some feelings. Come on. It's not an apology. And I said, okay, do it again. And it does the same thing. And there's no shame in getting it wrong. Anyway, so I'm a big fan and I just hate it at the same time. But what's so interesting is I don't feel that AI will ever replace our curiosity. And I often talk about how curiosity and care, they have the same root word, cura, C-U-R-A. It means to cure. Care, curiosity, and also the third word is curate. So what we do in our coaching conversation is we curate people's stories by co-constructing meaning around something that they care about. And I think that's where the power is. But how do we do that? You just experience peer coaching or group coaching, and then somehow there are some ideas and insights. And I hope that this actually makes a difference as you go about your day tomorrow, for sure. But then how did it happen? So I wanted to share with you something that I'm so passionate about. Many of you might know this already, called Dialogic Orientation Quadrant. Do you know about that actually? Have you heard of that before? It's your first time? Okay, some of you, yes, no, okay, cool. And I'm going to actually show you a very simple model where you do not need to memorize a single line, because we have a specific direction that we're following if we are having coaching conversation. Okay, you ready for this? I'm going to draw this so you can follow along very quick. This is something that's I usually express this as a napkinable idea. If you actually have a napkin beside you, a good time to use it, okay? So when clients talk about your life or their life, and this is the time that you go back to your transcript that you're texting me as well. Go to your private chat, the section where you were actually answering my prompts. And I'm going to ask you to organize your script, maybe according to this. So you're talking about something that happened in your past, in your narrative for about maybe 15 minutes. We did that group coaching. So you were typing something about something that happened in your past. And then also you were typing about something that might happen in the future. So often our clients, or actually all of us, we have a timeline in our stories. Something that happened, something that might happen, and we go back and forth. And then, of course, some people say, what about now? So here's a now. It's actually defined for researchers only, but this might be useful. Here's the now where you and the client sitting together. Time and place that you share with your client is actually defined as now in this model. So now in our case is when we have that coaching, group coaching together is the now. Beginning and end of the session was now. And also when you look at your own narrative that you were just typing or writing down, you also see another dimension. So here's a vertical line that I'm drawing in the whiteboard for those of you who are not seeing it. So I have a horizontal line going from past to future, left to right. Right in the center is now. And also top to bottom, I am drawing a straight line. And on the top is something that people say that they want more. This is what I want more. And people will also say, this is what I want less. I don't want it on the bottom. So top to bottom is preference line. So we have timeline and preference line intersecting in the middle. And you will be able to actually, I would highly recommend you copying and pasting or just copying your meeting the chat history when you're being coached and look at it this way. Because many of you might actually have some quadrants more than some others. So when you look at these two lines intersecting, top right corner is quadrant 1, which is something that might happen in the future that I want more, which is what we call preferred future. So preferred future is one area of our conversation. This is how we organize what clients say, part of curation. And the top left corner is called something that happened in the past that I would love to see more. It's like, I loved it. So it could be interactions, feelings, maybe thoughts, behaviors, and all these things that has happened, or relationships, or people who are maybe your network, support system, all those things that happened in the past that you just really cherish. It's called quadrant 2, also known as resourceful past. Okay. Quadrant 3 is, what is this? Bottom left. Bottom left is the area where something that happened in the past, and that was not preference, not my preference. So quadrant 3 could be some not so good memories. Sometimes actually those memories are minefields. You don't know when it's going to be triggered, and trauma lives there, regret lives there, guilt, shame, all those familiar words, they live there. And this is called troubled past. And what's comforting is all of us have it. Isn't that awesome? So all of us have this troubled past. And quadrant number 4 is the bottom right corner, which is something that we say that might happen in the future that, oh, we would not like to see. I do not want to see that happen. This is where anxiety lives. Like, this is their home. Anxiety, fear, and all those things. And we call it dreaded future. Quadrant 4 is dreaded future. As you look at your first little bit of your narrative, maybe you can already see where your narrative may live. But I was very specific in my prompts and directions. So many of you actually mentioned about what you like to see. But oftentimes when you're in conversations with maybe your friends and family, you say, so, hey, how's it going? How's it going? Is like, what are you asking? They can tell you from 1, 2, 3, 4, and guess what we usually pick? Us humans are awesome because we are so good at sharing stories of hurt and fears, because I really believe those sharing those stories they come from place of care. Think about it. Why do we share that? Because then we want to make sure that other people don't get hurt, maybe. So when we hear that, oh, this happened to them and they got hurt, we come and tell our family so they can be careful next time. But what ends up happening when you look at communication research, we speak about and we detect and notice quadrant 3 and 4, which is the bottom quadrants, at least 3 times more likely than quadrant 1 and 2. especially unprompted. Dinner conversations. They tell you something about 3 and 4 3 times more than 1 and 2. And of course, us who are sort of trained as coaches, we sit there, we're trying to shift the conversation. It doesn't work. So we end up talking about, oh, nice shoes, nice bag. So what's interesting is, though, naturally, we talk about quadrant 3 and 4. Then the next question I always ask coaches and mentors, where do you think in coaching session we're trying to orient our client towards? Which quadrants do you think is what we're trying to really get our clients to look at that we believe is useful? Okay. Many of you say 1 and 2, 1 and 2, yeah. 1 and 4 says, okay, cool. 2 and 1, 1 and 4, Mark. Yeah, see that? Ooh, all 4, Pearl. Hey, hey, hey. Cool. Yes. Yeah, that's so interesting. Yes, yes. 3 and 1, Paul, yeah? You know, what's so interesting is often, especially if you do something that's called coaching, we acknowledge all 4. There's a difference between acknowledging and exploring. Acknowledging is if somebody says something from 3 and 4, you don't avoid it. You are not trying to shift them. Someone actually put it in the chat box earlier about grief. And that I cannot tell you how real that is. Especially when people talk about grief. I think that maybe makes other people uncomfortable. I'm comfortable talking about my grief. Yesterday was actually the 3rd year anniversary of my dad's passing. And my mom changed the language around it. So instead of actually remembering as a day of his passing, she wants us to call it his heaven birthday. So it was his 3rd heaven birthday. And we don't actually call his cemetery. We actually call it his new home. So we gathered around his new home, celebrating his 3rd heaven birthday yesterday. It's a new way of saying it, but it doesn't mean that I am not grieving. But then what happens is whenever I talk about this grief, because it's such a human part of it, people get so uncomfortable. Like we don't know what to say when somebody says, oh, I lost so-and-so. We get stuck. And then what do you say? So it's uncomfortable, I think. So I've actually have experienced some coaches do something like this. I talk about my grief and all those things, and they judged my grief as quadrant 3 and 4, and they wanted to shift me out of it. So they said, okay, so what do you need to do to get over it? Or when is a good time to move on from it? And many other utterances like that that were profoundly offensive. But I know they're coming from a place of care, but it was just really not welcome. Because when clients are there, it has to be acknowledged. If you do not acknowledge it and try to shift it, then actually, when you look at research, what happens when you don't acknowledge what they say, they're going to come back to it. And also they will say, okay, you didn't get me, you didn't hear me. So what we do is acknowledging all 4 quadrants. Now then, second part of that is, though, exploring. Exploring usually comes in the form of questioning often. And there are many other actually ways of exploring. For example, when somebody's telling me, oh yeah, I'm going through this and that. If I go, I'm actually telling them, listening, continue. But if I say, when you look at a transcript, it's actually transcribed exactly like AHA, or But this one is, tell me more, functions differently. So exploring could actually take many forms, including questions. We may actually use questions to explore more. For example, I'll give you one very quick example of a scaling. For those of you who were not familiar with how I use the scaling, By the way, entire process that I did is from solution-focused brief coaching. I didn't invent it, okay? So I just hope that that's clear, that here's a specific modality that I used. And it may sound different for different practitioners, but that's the modality that I follow. And what happens is, when I ask you, or when I actually prompt you in different ways, I am acknowledging, but it was difficult to do that without actually having actual two-way conversation. So I paid a lot of attention to make sure that I was containing your context as much as I can. For example, when I ask you to think about or imagine, and you're thinking about all these different things, since I am not engaging one-on-one conversation, since I'm doing group coaching, as many of you might actually start doing as well, I couldn't really acknowledge everyone by preserving what you said, like word for word. So instead of doing that, I actually said, so all those things, somehow tomorrow, as you walk around your life, vague enough that I made sure that it's not fantasy, but what you just talked about. And I preserved the context as much as I could. And what's so interesting with that is, I don't really need to know the logic, or I don't need to know the details of your life. What matters is that you see the details of your day. So when you're looking around, probably you imagined yourself tomorrow, looking around, somehow standing in that room. I don't know what you saw, but you know what you saw. And that's what matters. So what we do often is we use exploration so that we can do a bit of shift. For those of you who were a little bit you felt you were low on the scale. So I acknowledged that, I realized that you might feel that this is pretty low for you, which is kind of acknowledging their quadrant 3, their trouble past. But then I actually then prompted, so how are you coping there? How are you coping there? What do you think the client will actually give me if I ask that question? How are you coping where you are at right now? What helps you cope with your situation? Which quadrant do you think I am orienting my clients to look at? You see that? It's pretty clear, isn't it? So what we do is we acknowledged, but we do this little activation. Resource activation is what we call when you go in this direction from bottom quadrants to upper quadrants. We call it resource activation. Some of you actually wrote in your narrative. By the way, you can actually analyze all your narratives into these 4 quadrants. I really hope that you do that actually after this call. And then many of you actually mentioned about your quadrant 4. I can read that here. And then when our clients give us this quadrant 4, how do we do this resource activation with, while acknowledging? How do we explore this? What would you say? How would you prompt when somebody's telling you their dreaded future? Nicola, thank you. You can save chat. What a great idea. I didn't know that existed. Thank you. Okay. Absolutely. Alexander says, what might support you to move up a notch on a scale? Absolutely. That's absolutely one way. And I really hope that you have your way of really doing this shift. So sometimes when people tell me about their dreaded future, and usually they don't tell me, they think it, but they might not say it. I often just invite them to think about, you must spend a lot of time thinking about it because this is important for you. So now spending all that time thinking about it and so on, what's actually clearer than before? And all of a sudden they have like some pretty cool ideas. Because when we look at quadrant 4, sure, we call it dreaded future. But the reason why the more dread we have, actually, that's an indicator of what we want to protect because we don't want to lose it. My biggest dreaded future is something happening to my mom or something happening to my dogs. It's not because I'm an anxious person. It's actually because I got so much to protect. I care so much about it. So when you reframe the language that when somebody's really dreading something, and there's something that they really value that they think they might lose. So when we ask them, so what are you trying to protect here? Because clearly this is something that's important for you. Now you're having a completely different conversation. So this is Dialogic Orientation Quadrant model that I follow in my coaching conversation because I don't memorize the lines. I memorize the directions. So as you can see in the replay, I hope that you get to actually watch it again. I started from quadrant 1 and I built around the quadrant 1. And I said, what does that do? And I asked a few more times about what does that do? Who notices? What difference do you notice? And those of you who already know this little plant, that vegetable that grows like this, I usually say this is a potato, but I recently was told that also ginger, they grow like this. Is that true? I don't know. Potatoes, they actually grow like this. So usually in our coaching class, this is known as growing potatoes in your conversations. So client gives you the first topic and we grow potatoes. So what else? Why is it important to you? Who else will notice the difference? We grow this vivid description of your preferred future. And that's what we do first, before we actually do anything else, getting clarification of what it is that you would like to see happen. And then the second part of that, my direction was, then I went to, when have you seen something like that already happening in your life? Some of you said, well, last week I went out with my friends, last night. Many of you actually had the answer to, I have seen this one happen, and this one happen, already happening. And then after that, I did a scaling question. Jason, what is spud? I don't know what that vegetable is. I'm looking at the chat. Ginger, but what's a spud? Is a spud or spud? Is it sort of, oh, okay. Hey, there you go. Yes. Oh, really? How is it the same thing? Okay, all right. Oh, British slang, is it? Okay, I've never heard that before. So do you actually call it spud soup? Anyway, coming back here. So direction I follow. I start from quadrant 1. And then I build quadrant 2 based on their quadrant 1. And naturally, our clients give us quadrant 3 and 4. I know how to acknowledge without exploring. Without acknowledging, the client will not walk with you. So I wanted to share this with you because when I do group coaching, my preference actually is group coaching or team coaching. Actually, my favorite setting is team coaching because instead of saying, who will notice? What would they do? I can actually ask them, what would you do? What would you do? But when it comes to group coaching, it's actually the same thing as one-on-one coaching, but group coaching is much easier because you don't have the burden of carrying the content of the client's life. So when we have this not knowing stance, I mean, if you feel the need to gather information, then you are going to end up asking tons of questions like doctors do. But that's not our job. Our job is to contain the client in their own logic of doing their life. And our stance is learning from them how they do their life and how they want to do it differently, and really facilitate that story so that they can curate their preferred stories. So that's what I think. Hey, do you have questions for me so far? There are so many other ways that we can play with it. I actually even brought some cards that sometimes I play with my students too. So I have a deck of question cards, and there are actually 52, and I shuffle them. And then I ask my class to pick one. So everyone picks one, 30 people pick one card, and then we just go random coaching. And even that clients find useful because it's in that interaction something happens. It's not a set of questions that is making it work. So please do not memorize your lines, but please remember your direction. What is on the cards? I don't know, some questions. You don't have to know. Don't get these cards. It's going to ruin your coaching practice. Come up with your own, okay? Don't buy stuff. Don't even go to coaching classes. You know enough. Like, what are you doing? Really though, we don't learn so much from going to classes. Did you know? The real class is when you have conversation with your client. Your client is your best teacher. You kidding? Man, that's awesome. Hey, questions? What do you think? So Hannah says coaching groups that are on the same team. Team coaching actually is really brilliant. Especially I use a lot of scaling with teams. And one example is I ask team of 10 people, scaling. So 10, team is really healthy and all those things. And one is like opposite, where are you? And 10 people give 10 different answers. What are you gonna do? And or even better, somebody says, oh, our team is at 8. And people roll their eyes. Are you kidding me? You brown nose. You know, we are totally at 2. So it becomes really dynamic to work with scales with a team. And we are uncomfortable. It's like, oh my gosh, they're not agreeing with each other. It's not of a consensus. It's just about their sense of progress. Scaling is a metaphor of progress. If somebody says 2, somebody says 8, doesn't matter. You ask about how did you get there? Where would be good enough point for you to be at? Well, we'll tell you that you're at that point. So please don't be alarmed when people give you 10 different points on a scale, okay? Lindsay says, how do you effectively acknowledge quadrants 3 and 4? Please don't skip this. When you hear client's response, don't shoot another question ever. I cannot stress this enough. When we see seasoned practitioners tapes, they never go from question to question to question. They post something, client answers, and then usually they pause and say, so okay, like this. They make a statement first, acknowledgement. Then, only when they have their agreement, they then go to ask another question. For example, somebody's talking about, oh, it's been so difficult with my so-and-so. And the coach doesn't say, okay, so what do you want different? That's not what seasoned coaches do. What they do is this. Oh, wow, that sounds really tough, huh? Client says, yeah, it's been crazy. So how are you coping with all that? And we call that in like communication science, we call that calibration. So clients give us this information, we have to sort of glue it. So unless we let them know that I gotcha. Oh, it's been crazy with my nephews. So what do you want different? Like, what are you, ChatGPT? So what you need to do is acknowledging sounds like, oh, wow, sounds tough, eh? Teenagers, huh? Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, how are you coping with all that? That's great because you just acknowledged and explored in that one weaving sequence. So please, that's how we do acknowledging exploration. Every single turn we take, okay? What else? That's awesome. I don't know. What other questions do you have? Maybe I'm not seeing all the questions here. When you work with teams, do you share their answers? Absolutely. I actually ask them to share. I love it, especially when they accuse each other. It's like, you're so optimistic, or you're like so pessimistic. What's wrong with you? And actually, I had a team member who said, we are, as a team, we're at a 2. And then this other person, what are you? You're so negative. We're definitely at least at a 7. So I'm sitting there thinking, cool. So then how do you have that conversation? So I turned to the person, I said to the person who said 2, I said, so you didn't say 1. So what is it that you see? That, you see that's happening. So that what got you to a 2? And she was actually first sarcastic with her answers, which is fantastic. And then she's like saying some other things. And finally she said, well, at least we are now communicating using this book. Something very small, but something came up. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then I then asked her, so, and then what do you think she, who said 7, she experiences differently than you do for her to be at 7? And then again, sarcasm comes and she's like, oh, she doesn't know she's part-timer. I'm like, oh, come on, come on. And then I did that conversation back and forth. I turned to the person and I said, so you said you were at a 7 at least? Yeah, I think so. It's not because I'm part-time. Okay, so what do you really wish that, you know, she can also see on a regular basis for her to see what you see? So that conversation is so useful, especially having it in a team meeting. I don't know why we still do this ridiculous practice called 360. Why do we even do that? Especially when you say, oh, you know, tell us like, what is she doing well, 1, 2, 3, and then what do you think they need to work on? There's, you know, one thing. And you've done that, right? You get this report. I get this report all the time. 360. And it's like, and you're flipping through to that section. What people say that I need to work on. Do you do that? Or is that just me? Okay, I live in quadrant 4, okay? That's my home. So I go to those reports and I look at it, it's like, oh, it's my fault. So 360, especially in HR practice, not done well, is killing teams. There are now enough evidence to show that. We think 360 is a thing to do. No, it's not. So then how do it differently so that it's actually useful? It's even better when people are in the same room dialoguing. Anyway, we'll get to that maybe next dialogue. That can be a topic, how to do performance conversation. But anyway, hey, other questions? What do you think? Oh, for those of you who don't know what 360 is, it may be called something different in your world, but it's asking people around you about your performance, and those questions are interventions. You got to be careful, because once you get the report saying so and so said you need to work on this, you go to your work next day and it's like, oh, who said that? You said that? You said that? So anyway, hey, what else? Here's maybe for time, I'll take one last one, that cultural differences. It's so interesting. Do I see differences in cultures? Actually, surprisingly, so far, not really. I think every culture, people are people. We care about what we care about. I don't think there's any culture where people don't know what they care about. So coaching is actually about curating stories about what people care about. And I think it's actually transcultural experience that we have with another human being. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. This was fun.
Thank you.
Do you think we'll ever get to see each other in person in our lifetime?
Oh, I hope so. Do you know what? Actually, that is a good segue, actually, Haesun, because I can put in the chat here as well, is our EMCC conference, which is taking place in Prague in June. If you'd like to come to that, I'm going as well. I look forward to seeing you there if you're going. Is anybody going? I see any hands. I see any immediate hands. Come, it'll be great.
Oh,
Thank you so much for this dialogue, this brilliant session with you. I was looking at the chat and we were saying this is amazing. This is just so brilliant to be able to share your thinking on this and really hear some practical things which we can do now. And I mean, do save your own chat as well, because going through your own answers, especially looking at the dialogic quadrant, is really quite fascinating. And I was really I don't know, the way that we did the prompts first and then now we can analyze our answers means that you're analyzing things which you didn't know in advance that you'd be doing. So it's all really authentic stuff and can't be skewed. So Haesun, thank you so much on behalf of the EMCC Global. Once again, brilliant session. Thank you. Right. So Samuel, the video editor. Hi, Sam.
Okay.
So Haesun, what are you yourself taking away from this session?
It's interesting because I've done group coaching before, and I would say this was actually, we had about over 100 people doing group coaching together, and I wasn't sure, but then when I invited people to use the private chat to process this, I was blown away by their stories. It's every single time I learned that we take ourselves maybe too seriously, that we think we're so important in the session. We are, but what really is a highlight for me is that people will make useful progress given that dedicated time. And how do we actually show up to curate or co-author those stories with our clients? And that can be done through chats, virtual, and all these things. I'm blown away.
Wonderful. Thank you, Haesun. Thank you.